Just about every artist I know loves to doodle and sketch eyes. But do those eye sketches look cartoony and unrealistic? And if so, what can you do to make your drawings look more realistic? Welcome back to another do's and don'ts video. My name is Emily, and in this video, I'll show you two different eye sketches, one poorly drawn and the other more carefully rendered. My first tip is to subscribe. Do it right now, it's totally free. And you get to watch more videos like this with tips, tricks, and techniques for realistic painting and drawing. Now, both of these sketches are done on the same piece of smooth, hot-pressed cotton watercolor paper, so the materials such as paper, types of pencils, etc. are not going to be factors here with how the two drawings look. In this video, we're going to talk strictly about technique. So let's start with the don'ts. Don't misjudge the eye shape. Proportions are everything when it comes to drawing, but it's easy to make assumptions about how something like an eye looks. We can let those assumptions dictate how we sketch, so instead of studying the reference photo closely and drawing what we see, we just draw what we think the shape should be. Here I drew an almond shape, because that's what eyes are shaped like, right? But if you compare my sketch to the reference photo, it's way too round. The lid is actually more slanted and angular, rather than perfectly round, and the iris isn't a complete circle. You can see the top and bottom lids should actually cover the circle shape slightly. Don't scribble the eyebrows on. Eyebrow hairs are not usually just parallel lines. Here I drew on the eyebrow quite hastily and with a messy scribbling motion. I also happened to make the eyebrow too small compared to the size of the eye. Don't do just one layer of shading. Add shading to your drawing and it will look real, right? Not necessarily. Here I did darken the iris and pupil and add some darker values to the upper eyelid, but I didn't take it far enough. The dark outer edge of the iris and the circular pupil really need to be much darker in order to reach the correct value, so a single layer of pencil strokes is insufficient. The moral of the story here is, take a little more time. This finished drawing isn't terrible. It looks like an eye and a somewhat pretty one, I guess, but it certainly doesn't look like the reference photo and it does not look realistic. So let's talk about the do's for creating a realistic eye drawing. Do take your time with proportions. For my second rendition of the eye, I went a little slower, drawing the initial shapes. I made the lid more angular and the overall eye shape slightly more narrow. Do add shading all over. After shading in the upper lid, which is an area in this image that is quite dark in value, I also add a first layer of shading to the lower lid, the corners of the eye, and even a little in the whites of the eye, which are rarely pure white. The goal is to give the effect of dimension and to gradually increase the values so that the bright highlights in the center of the eye will be the brightest thing in the whole drawing and they'll really pop. This is achieved only if you can make all the values surrounding those highlights dark enough. Do draw hair in the direction it's growing. For the eyebrow, I glance rapidly back and forth between my reference photo and my drawing just to make sure I'm moving my pencil in the direction each individual hair is growing. This looks much more realistic than just scribbling it on. You may have to adjust how you hold your pencil to get the correct angles and line directions. Do use a blending stump. To smooth out my light shading lines, I like to use a tortillon, which is also called a blending stump, usually made of rolled paper, to rub across the surface of the paper and make the shading nice and even. Be careful to start with light pressure. Start conservatively so that you do not accidentally add any harsh, dark shapes. Do add multiple layers to darken the values. I use more pressure to apply darker marks under the lid and in the crease and in the pupil and iris. You can alternate between laying down pencil strokes and then smoothing them out with your blending stump. Really take your time with this step and draw your shading on using light to medium pressure with a sharp pencil. Hold your pencil at an angle so that you can apply gentle side-by-side, uniform-looking pencil strokes. Continue to soften and smooth with your blender, applying more pressure in areas like the lid and iris to darken more. Do use an eraser to lift highlights back out. This should be the last step. The model's eyelid has a little bit of glossy shine to it, so I erased a couple little dots on the upper lid and also on the lower lid where there's a hint of moisture. Other areas you can almost always assume that there will be highlights are in the corner of the eye, at the tear duct, and of course reflections on the glossy surface of the iris and pupil. I like to use an eraser pen for those little details. All of these techniques can be easily applied to almost anything you draw with pencil. It just takes a little extra time and careful observation to take a drawing from meh to amazing. Hit that like button if you found this video helpful. Don't forget to subscribe and check out these other videos about sketching and drawing. See you in the next one.